Hello and welcome to the Dallas Weekly. I'm your producer and digital journalist, Jeremiah Long, and I am so happy to be bringing you this interview powered by Mark Cuban Companies. It's the first in our Business is Black campaign highlights, and I am so excited to be bringing you Tradeblock. Tradeblock is a sneaker trading app that is going to take the world by storm. We've been hearing a lot of buzz about it in the industry already, and we are graced to have all of the amazing people that founded this company, including Mbiyimoh Ghogomu and Darren Smith and Tony Malveaux. Mbiyimoh is the CEO, Darren is the COO, and Tony is the Director of Authentication. How's it going, guys?
Great.
Awesome, man. Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Great to be featured. We appreciate you guys.
Yeah, and so we love doing these interviews, and we love highlighting amazing technology companies and innovators and anybody who is doing amazing things within their space. So I'm just going to jump straight into it. Here at the Dallas Weekly, we got some sneakerheads. I'm just telling you, our publisher and our COO are both extremely big sneakerheads. And when they heard about your company, they were like, "Oh, yeah, I've heard of that." And then they were like, yeah, that's part of our world. That's part of the sneakerhead world. So tell me and tell everybody who doesn't know, what is Tradeblock?
Yeah, man. So I think the first thing to set some context is sneakerheads have been trading sneakers for decades. So if you're somebody from the outside, of that world, you may not be familiar with that. But if you're in sneaker culture, you know that that's been, fundamental to the culture from jump. It's always been buy, sell, and trade. And so much of the culture, especially early on, was sort of in-person based. So people would go to events and sneaker swaps and things like that. And, when you're in person, you can see the shoe, you can feel it, you can try to check it for yourself, and it's much easier to facilitate trades. But when you're talking about the digital world, obviously now there's this big gap in terms of trust, right? Mm-hmm. You and I may find or negotiate a good trade, but now both of us have to trust that the other person, is actually going to follow through and send the shoe, that they're not going to send us a fake shoe, even if they send us pictures of a real shoe up front. And so, ultimately, like, we've been, fans of sneakers and big sneakerheads ourselves for a long time. And so, we saw the rise of these other platforms that were facilitating buying and selling, and nobody was attacking the trade space. So after a while, we just said, hey, we owe it to ourselves to try to do this and see if people would be into it. So that's the problem we set out to solve. But, actually along the way, as we started to build it, we really, stumbled across this other huge opportunity. And in a nutshell, what we realized was, after the point of buying or selling, there was all of this energy and stuff that was happening, right? There was people on Instagram showing off their collections, people in Discord channels or in Facebook groups talking about releases. Ultimately, there was a ton of social activity that was not being captured at all by the existing marketplaces. And so we said, man, if we can be really intentional about creating a place where sneakerheads can come to transact, to acquire new shoes and all of those things, but also just to connect with one another, right? Discover awesome collectors and cool collections, rediscover shoes you may have really loved 10 or 15 years ago, but have just kind of rolled off your radar. So that's what Tradeblock is.
That's awesome. So I'll tell you this: when in classic shoe terms, my most classic shoes were the Shacknosis. I don't know if you guys remember those, but they're like they look like a hypnotic swirl of, like, I had the black and white ones, the zebra ones, and man, people did not know what to think about those shoes. Their minds were just like blown. They couldn't believe they existed, and people were they were divisive a little bit. People were like, either those are the most amazing shoes I've ever seen in my life, or they're like, you got zebras on your feet, bro. And I was all about it. I kept those shoes so clean. Well,
I have to just dovetail on that real quick and just riff, because what you're speaking to is really one of the biggest inspirations behind the platform. So we actually have a term that we coined called variably valued goods. And what it came down to was, the value of a sneaker is very much predicated on who you're talking to. So you love the Shaq Zebras. There was a ton of people who hated the Shaq Zebras, Yeah. I may be willing to pay twice the market value for a shoe if it was, the same shoe that I got as a kid that was, a really meaningful gift from somebody in my family. And so with trading, you can really take those things into account a lot more, because it's not just about what's the absolute dollars and cents price of this shoe. It's, hey, is this shoe that I'm getting more valuable to me personally than the shoe that I'd be giving up? So yeah, I love that story. Zebras are on my wish list.
Ooh, yeah, definitely. And how did you guys meet?
Oh man, like, so this isn't your typical like met at university, college buddies, and we decided to work on a startup. We actually go way back. So me and Mbiyimoh met in sixth grade. I was in sixth grade, he was in seventh, and we connected around basketball, meeting at the YMCA, and obviously went to the same school. And then fast forward 2 years later, I met Tony in eighth grade, and we really just connected on being cool, fashionable, and vertically challenged. So I don't know if you can tell the height differentials right now, but Mbiyimoh's like 6'5", and then me and T are 5'7", 5'8" in Air Force Ones. I'm probably 5'8". And so yeah, we hit it off like right off the bat. And then we all went to the same high school. T and Mbiyimoh ran track together. Me and Mbiyimoh hooped together, and yeah.
Man, that's great. And so tell me this. So you talked more about how you guys are deep in the shoe world. Have you guys always been sneakerheads, or what each of you in each of your answers? How did you guys get really deep in the sneakerhead world?
So with that, me personally, my sister was my biggest influence. So growing up as a kid, she worked at the Galleria in Houston, and so every week I used to see her come home with like a different pair of like Nike Dunks, and so like that was like an inspiration for me as a kid, just seeing her with a different shoe for every day of the week, if you will. And so like once I got out of high school, like one of my dream jobs at the time was working at Foot Locker. And so got there, got that job. And so like I was super, super excited. And that was like right around the time where all of the like craze around sneakers like blew up in 2012. So like I was like talking to Darren about it like every day, like how I had this job at Foot Locker. And so I asked my manager to help him get a job. And so we worked there for the summertime. So yeah, that's really that. And so like a full circle moment too. My sister actually works for Tradeblock now. And so like a pretty dope moment.
Also, as of what, like a week ago?
2 weeks.
2 weeks ago. So like, yeah, that like sneakers is just, that's my personal reason for loving it. And then as far as like everything like about sneakers, if you will, so like how the culture behind it, so hip hop, sports, how it just had like right in the middle of that intersection for everything. That's where my love for it comes from.
Absolutely. Yeah, and he's a huge inspiration for me being into it the way that I am. When we met in eighth grade, I wasn't really into Jordans. Obviously, I knew who Jordan was, but I could never afford him growing up. And so I kind of just like directed my attention somewhere else and made what I could afford cool. I don't know if you guys remember Dada, the brand Dada. And so like
the wood grain joints?
The wood grain joints. I would, before the basketball season, my mom, because they were still cheap, even if you customize them, you could put your name on the side and your number. And so I remember in eighth grade, actually, at Westbrook, our school colors were red and black. And so I got the red and black joints, had my name on the side and my number on the back. I think they were like $60. And I made them joints the coolest thing on the court, if you ask me. So yeah, but yeah, T was a huge inspiration to like why I'm actually into it today.
And then at the same time that they were at Foot Locker, I was actually, just around the corner in the same mall working at Finish Line. So, ironically, we were all in that space around the same time when it was getting crazy. And I think, I'm somebody who's really into kind of like behavioral psychology and just kind of understanding trends and all of those sorts of things. So one of the things that stuck with me the most is when I started to see, people come in and offer associates like $100, $200, $300 cash to like backdoor shoes, right? So there would be a major Jordan release coming on Friday, and you would have people come in. It's like, yo, can you hold a size 10 for me? I'll give you a couple bills. And I was sitting there like, the shoe only retails for $170. How are you giving $300 to this person? And that's, started investigating, and I had a buddy of mine there who was really into reselling at the time. He was like, yeah, they're turning around and flipping those shoes for $500-$600. So, that just got my mind going. And then I think the other thing that I love is, I'm just really into design. And so I really get into the story and the inspiration behind the shoe. Like, why were the materials chosen? Why did this designer even decide to work on a shoe in the first place? So it's cool, man. Like, I think we all have different reasons why we love the space, but ultimately, I think the other thing is we're all here for the people. Like, the culture is awesome. And, you know, you go to these events and you meet sneakerheads, like some of the coolest people you'll ever meet.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so for you, you were working at Finish Line at the time when they were at Foot Locker. It's somewhat of an interesting full circle for your story then, because after Finish Line, graduated college, went on to work at IBM. Can you tell us a little bit about IBM and why you decided to eventually leave IBM to start Tradeblock?
Yeah, man, the world works in strange ways. So I graduated from Texas and my degrees were in sociology and journalism. And my plan was actually to go, you know, work for a publication, maybe like Dallas Weekly, like a local, you know, magazine or newspaper. Because I had a really strong writing background. I had started a news blog with a buddy of mine. And I just got a call randomly one day from my friend Colin, who was basically a UI designer at IBM at the time. He said, "Hey, we're starting this team that its purpose is to tell stories about design thinking." I had no idea what design thinking was, but I was like, yeah, I could write some blog posts, like run it. So I joined IBM, and it was the best decision I ever made. You know, I just got immersed in the world of design thinking, you know, product development. And what I always say is, you know, my 3.5, 4 years there, I can't imagine a better crash course in business, because you get to see, you know, from idea through to user research to the concept and ideation. And then, you know, all right, when we create awesome designs, now there's a whole process in terms of how do we then work really well with our development and engineers to get these designs implemented. And then how do we continue to improve this, you know, this product, working with the business manager who's ultimately responsible for the business results of the product. So I say, like, you know, IBM taught me almost everything that I knew in terms of like both the right way to do things and, you know, in many cases, the wrong way to do things. So after 3.5, 4 years, I was just like, man, I feel like I have the chops to really kind of lead design and product direction. But because I didn't have a formal background in those disciplines, it was more difficult for me to find that opportunity within IBM. And then, you know, as luck would have it, Darren hits me up and he's like, hey, let's go get lunch. I just want to catch up. And really what he was doing was pitching me on becoming a third co-founder of Tradeblock. So, you know, ultimately it was an awesome opportunity to put those skills to work. But I'd say more than anything, what led me to quit my job was these guys. Like the first time we chatted, first couple times we chatted, I tried to hedge. I was like, hey man, I got this really busy job. I got all these other things going on, but this sounds dope. Obviously I love you guys. You know, I love to see like young Black people, especially people I know, going into tech. So I was like, hey, you can have, you know, an hour or two of my time every weekend. I'll kind of try to give you some pointers on things I think you should be doing, et cetera. And was like, yeah, I'll just kind of be like a mentor. I think we had 2 calls before I was like, well, guys,
Poison.
I give up. And I think it was 2 things. One, the idea was just so compelling and I couldn't stop myself thinking about it. You know, I think within the first week I had 30 pages in my notebook filled up with just different product sketches and thoughts and ideas. But then the other thing was, you know, the point that we were talking about earlier, their hustle is insane. Our ground game is crazy. And within a week or 2, I was like, you guys hit 4 sneaker events in the last 2 weeks and have built relationships with all of these influencers and got 1,000 likes on your Instagram page, like just off of talking about this. Wow, like this is incredible. So I just realized, hey, you know, if I join this team, I can focus on the things that I'm good at and that I'm passionate about, knowing that these guys, you know, would basically handle everything else. So yeah, the passion and hustle was just infectious. Really, I had no say in the matter.
It had to happen. It was going to happen. It was a train rolling down the line, and you're either getting on or it was going to keep on going. I can see that. Opportunities like that sometime. Well, you know,
and Darren, I gotta say, Darren is also the best seller you will ever meet. Actually, you should tell a little bit of your backstory too.
Yes, I mean, I like to say I was blessed with cursed with a dream. One of my, it's a lyric out of a rap song, but yeah, like super early on, dating back to like 2nd grade, I started selling Pokemon cards, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and stuff like that. So I was raised by my mom, and just seeing her struggle, it was always on my mind. Okay, how can I like flip $1 and make it 2 and kind of help with that? And so super early on, I was just like, hey, I can do what I can. And so I was selling Yu-Gi-Oh cards, Pokemon cards, graduated to buying candy in bulk and selling that at school and stuff like that. And almost started a tamale company with my mom because she has a crazy recipe for tamales. And so, yes, Tony's had them. So, and so yeah, always just looking. And I would just say I'm a horrible employee as well. Just like post graduation, I never kept a job more than like 12, 13 months. And it was because like I was always looking for an opportunity to do something on my own. Yeah, and so when T brought this idea to me when we were working at Foot Locker, saying, "Hey man," because he was huge into the ESPN trade machine, and he was like, "Man, bro, it would be super dope if we could apply," or someone at the time he was saying someone, if someone would apply the ESPN trade machine concept to the sneaker world. And fast forward, GOAT comes on the scene, then StockX, and then they blow up, and we were like, "Bro, nobody, they still aren't doing what we talked about." And it was like, okay, it's time to go. So we started the Instagram page in March or April of 2019, and I quit my job that August.
Wow. Yeah, that's true innovation. And that's where people see innovation. You know, innovation is always finding that thing that's just not being done in the market where you see this room to grow. Well, speaking directly to that, what are some of the things y'all are doing to differentiate Tradeblock from other companies that are in the space?
Yeah, I guess I'll take that one too. I think that answer is kind of three-pronged in a way. So first being the business model itself. So right now you can't go anywhere and actually trade your shoes for another pair of shoes. You can only go on these other platforms and buy the shoe that you're looking for. And so there's no way of unlocking the value of your own collection right now. And that's something that we're opening up. So one is the business model itself. And then two, I would say is just customer service. I know it sounds super trite and cliche, but these other guys have made it really, really easy for us to differentiate in that way because their customer service is horrible. And we're speaking from personal experience. You can hit these guys up and not get a response in 48 to 72 hours. And not to mention when you do, it's an obviously automated response. And so when you're coming with Tradeblock, you're going to get responsiveness. We guarantee that a real person is going to respond to you within 24 hours of you reaching out. We're respectable with all of our dialogue, and then reasonable in our approach to resolution. And so they've set, unfortunately, but fortunately for us, like the bar has been set pretty low in terms of differentiating in that perspective. And so we're super intentional about that. And then the third being just our ground game. And so we hustle hard, as Mbiyimoh's mentioned, hustle super hard. And we've been very intentional about touching the people and being super rooted in the culture. And so we go to these sneaker events. These other companies actually don't have a presence at all, like not even brand ambassadors with a table. But then you see Tradeblock.
It's kind of crazy. It was one of the craziest that jumped out at me. But
yeah.
Sorry. Keep going.
No, good. And so they don't even have a table there with brand ambassadors to kind of represent the brand. But you see us, the founders of the company, at these events, meeting people, talking, chopping it up. And so we cultivated really strong relationships with sneaker influencers and just regular people, collectors that love the game. One of which being Unbreakable Kicks, who was instrumental in like our initial growth in the beta. He posted a video, and then like our sales kind of went through the trades went through the roof. It was insane. So shout out to Unbreakable.
Hey, that's awesome. And let's hear a real quick clip from Unbreakable and see what he's mentioning about Tradeblock.
Trade. Now, Army, I use the Tradeblock app. Tradeblock app to me is gonna be one of the dopest apps now. I seen people like Talks with TJ use and talk about Tradeblock app. I seen like Word Custom. So I seen a lot of other sneaky YouTubes talk about this app. So I had to check it out for myself and see what the hype is about. And actually going through the app, to me, Army, y'all know when y'all go to like SneakerCon and they got a trade pick. To me, that's what it is. You got StockX, you got GOAT, you got SneakerCon app, and the only thing you can do is buy, use, or brand new sneakers. But the Tradeblock app.
Wow. So I'll stop him there. But if you guys go to YouTube and just look up Unbreakable Kicks and look up Tradeblock, there is a really great explanation of why he loves Tradeblock. Everything about it, he breaks it down, and the reasons why someone inside of the industry and inside of Sneakerheads, why they would like it. So it's great to watch. I like watching that video because, as someone who's kind of outside the Sneakerhead world, it really gave me a great overview of why the passion is so strong for your company. But also, if you're inside that world, I'm sure that every every niche and every buzzword that he has in there really will captivate sneakerheads, you know, and because I was looking at his page, he's a very big influencer from my research. And so, yeah, it's really interesting to see him go in there like that. And I really like that over on your website, and I'll flash that one more time too, that you guys were able to put a little bit of social proof directly on your website, which is something you just don't see enough of, I don't think, when it comes to when you're launching apps or you've got a really great product. There's not enough people just highlighting it. Hey, by the way, guys, people know who we are, and just putting it out there. So big shout out for having your social proof so great. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
Real quick, just to dovetail on that, I think the other thing that I love, again, my background is in content. And I think the thing that's unique about trading, one of the things is that like a trade is a story. If you go buy a shoe, what's the story? I bought that shoe, and here's what I paid for it. When you're trading, there's a whole negotiation. So it's like, I offered this shoe. They countered and asked for this other shoe. I said, this is going to cost, that's a little bit too much. I need you to throw in some cash. So there's a whole kind of story, and, you know, there's a little bit of friction that I think actually makes the moment of securing your trade that much more valuable. And so one of the things that like we didn't plan for this, it really just happened organically, but the stuff like the Unbreakable Kicks video and all of the other videos on our site, like the vast majority of those were unprompted and basically all unpaid. So it was just incredible to us that people were like, man, we love this service so much that not only are we going to use it, but then we feel compelled to talk about it and tell the story of using it. So that's been huge for us.
Yeah. Something else I noticed by doing some research on some of the other sneakerhead people that do a lot of reviews, especially people that are doing reviews of where to go and the best marketplaces and the best discords for finding these deals, is that they're always giving tips on how not to get ripped off. They're constantly having to remind you, hey, as important as it is to find the right shoes, here's how important it is to not find the wrong shoes, because there's plenty of people out there that will allow you to pay thousands of dollars for a fake shoe, and there's buzzwords, and I'm sure there's language to differentiate it. So tell me this, especially Tony, you're a director of authentication. I love that title too. That's a very important title in your company, I'm guessing. Tell me, like, what do you guys do to avoid, or what do you tell your consumers to avoid getting ripped off, and how do you ensure that that you have authentic product?
Well, first, you just go to this app right here in the App Store, download Tradeblock. That's the first place you go to make sure that you get some authentic shoes. But no, in all seriousness, we take authentication super seriously, just because, like you said, there's a ton of fakes floating around, and like, it's nothing worse than, like you said, paying $1,000 for a shoe just to find out that like it wasn't legitimate. And so we take that super serious. We're one of the only platforms, if not the only platform, that take our shoes to a 2-factor authentication. So we run a digital and a physical check. The digital is a bunch of images that we run against others to make sure that it's real. Obviously, we run them against real shoes in those scenarios. And then we have a physical authenticator that gets the shoe in his hand, examines it, and makes sure that everything's legit.
Yeah, and so neither of them can see the results of the other one. And our thing is, if both of them don't say yes, it's a pass, we send it back. You know, our policy is we'd rather reject, a couple of real shoes that we're not sure about than let any fakes through the system. So shout out to Tony, because you're in good hands with Tony at the helm on authentication for sure.
That's incredible, and that's got to be reassuring in a marketplace where if you look up Jordans, the first 10 results on Google are for fake sites. They're like, you find as many fake sites as you do legitimate sites, and they're pumping the numbers up on those websites using every method they can think of when it comes to SEO and stuff like that, because, I mean, clearly they're making sales on these fake shoes. And just to be honest, if the shoe may look very, very similar, but my King Doug is my partner in the hip hop world, right? Very big hip hop head. He's bought fake Jordans before, and he figured it out real quick. He put them on his feet, wore them out to the club, and when that sole came right off,
Ooh.
he didn't like the way he felt in the club, and he didn't like the way he felt.
Had to leave the club early. Gotta go.
Yeah.
Literally had to slide out the club.
Slide out. Yeah. Yeah. So speaking to people like King Doug, who are your main customers?
So I'll take that one as well. So our main customers are obviously sneakerheads, but like if you're into the sneaker world, that's like a bunch of different things now. So we have like your hype beasts, your resellers, your collectors. And so what we want to focus on with our app is the collectors, like the people who genuinely want to show off their shoes and like don't have to necessarily transact on them. Like all these other platforms where you put your shoe up, if someone places a bid on it, you have to let that shoe go. And we've created a platform where you can put your shoe up and then just kind of get a gauge on what everybody wants for your shoe. And so all of the offers, you don't have to accept, you can decline them if you want. And so like just highlighting around like people's real passion behind the sneakers. Like maybe there's not a price tag on a certain shoe for you just because of like the story behind it, like Mbiyimoh was saying earlier.
Yeah, and just to circle back on the point that I was making earlier, I mean, I think that sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought.
But speaking to that, about where the main customers come from and how they find you guys and how are people finding you?
Oh, I was going to say a quick anecdote early on. So I was talking about how we set out to create a platform for trading, and then we discovered this opportunity for the social. I think one of the moments where it really drove home for us is we were testing our beta app with different sneakerheads, people who these guys really had met out in the wild. And there's a screen where you're looking for a shoe. We basically show you, hey, here's every collector who has that shoe. And every time we would get to that screen, people's eyes would like widen up and they'd lean forward and they'd be like, wait a minute, you mean I could just explore everybody's collection and see everything they have? And we're like, yeah. And every time people are like, man, I would spend a ton of time just doing that, even if I don't think I might trade or plan on trading. So I think to Tony's point, like really we're trying to create an awesome experience for the collector that's not necessarily predicated on them, even doing a trade. If we can create something that creates value for them, beyond that, I think that's really the ultimate goal for us.
Yeah, for sure. Like being said, like there's so much buying and selling in the world right now as far as like the sneakers goes, like just giving them a place to come to where they can just show off if you that's all you want to do, or trade your shoes without having to pay some crazy amount of money to get it.
That's awesome. That's so innovative, and it's so respectful too. That's another thing. It's very much respectful of the scene that's going on. Because when you said that is an innovative. Did you guys expect the that part of your browse feature that you can see the collections other people have? Did you guys expect that to be such a popular feature?
I think so. Not to like.
No, that's great.
Too much, but yeah, one of the fundamental questions, and this is kind of dovetailing off of what Beam said, was like even before we started doing those tests with the users. Or our member, we call them our members. Like we ask the fundamental questions like, hey, if we create this thing the way we're thinking about creating it, and nobody trades one sneaker on it, do we still have something? Could we make it into something? And could it still be big? And the answer was yes. And for that exact reason, like you can come on, Tradeblock is somewhere where you can come on and actually we have that social feature where you can follow your favorite collectors, or let's say, hey, you're in the Jordan 1s. And you see somebody that has a collection of all Jordan 1s, the ones that you like, hit that follow button. And now you can see all of his or her activity. Like, hey, they just added another shoe to their closet. They added a shoe to their wish list. And so all of those social components of the app are something that drives value as well, not just the transactional aspect. And then,
per usual, I'm gonna dovetail off some. Yeah. I don't know if you got the little nuance where Darren said, our users actually are members. I think that's a small thing that's actually really important to us. We have offsites pretty regularly, kind of every other month. We'll go to an Airbnb and spend some time really just in a focused headspace. And at our last one, that was something that came up. And ultimately, what we were talking about was if we refer to people as users, literally just the way that we think about the people that we're serving is very, very different than if we refer to them as members. So technically, Darren owes us 10 push-ups. We set a rule. It's like, all right, anytime you use the term users, you got to do push-ups because these are real people. And if you call them users, you think about them as a number, right? Oh, we have 50,000 users and they're all just a data point. When we have 50,000 members, those are real people, right? And so it's those small things that I think oftentimes have a really big impact on a company culture and kind of how you approach, what you're doing and how you approach serving more than anything.
Absolutely. Well, being a journalist who is in a product development role, I definitely understand that but we talk about the separation of church and state with editorial and design and stuff. And it's like, yeah, I come in here and I'm like, all right, user generated data. And they're like, no, these are our people. We have to humanize the people you're talking about through data. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get that balance now. And I really try to impart that. It's one of the reasons we're doing these interviews, to humanize these amazing companies and apps. So I've got just a couple more questions, but it leads back into what you guys were saying. your ground game is very strong, not only getting out into the sneaker world, but communicating with your members and also growing your digital footprint through your socials and through your website is very slick as well. I'm sure you get a decent amount of traffic just primarily to your actual website itself too. But tell me, how have you been cultivating using your ground game, your connections with the sneakerhead world and pro athletes, people in the sphere, and just basically staying in the community like that?
Yeah. So, we've already talked a little bit about Unbreakable Kicks. That continues to this day. I mean, I think, again, just to brag on these guys, they're incredible relationship builders. And so we just have a roster of folks who, are just like not only really supportive and behind the idea itself, but who honestly are like, we like you guys and we want to see you guys win. And all credit goes to them for that. I think on the professional athlete side, absolutely. As Tony was pointing out earlier, sneakers really live in the intersection of a number of different cultures, sort of sports, fashion, music, etc. And so we definitely built some relationships with some professional athletes. I have to use this moment to give a major shout out to our guy, Ronnie Price. So Ronnie is a former NBA player, journeyman. He spent, some time with the Utah Jazz. He spent some time with the Lakers and a few other teams. But Ronnie actually went to the same high school as us. He's a couple years older, so we didn't cross over at all. But, grew up a couple blocks away from both of us. And, when we started Tradeblock, we were just kind of thinking, hey, who is in our network who, might be interested in this, might be able to push it forward. And then we remembered, oh, Ronnie Price's younger sister actually went to school with Tony and Darren. So, we reached out to her and she's like, sure, I'll chat with him about it. And man, I can't say enough positive things about Ronnie. From the very first call we were on, he was incredibly supportive. He basically said, hey, I'm in, let me know how I can help. I'm going to pull in other people. He actually pulled together a small group of Black investors. So all people who grew up in our neighborhood, who were like, yeah, we believe in these guys and we want to support something coming out of our part of Houston. So Ronnie has just been instrumental, built a ton of relationships for us as well. And then I also have to shout out my buddy Al Hughes, who was one of the people in that group. They actually grew up together and we're super good friends. And there's some hilarious stories about them. But Al now works for the Memphis Grizzlies. He's kind of their head of digital. So for their mobile app, their website, some of the digital stuff they do actually kind of in person at the arena. He helps oversee a lot of that. So, Ronnie and Al have been big, especially these past few months. And I'm going to be a little bit coy here, but I'm also just going to say there's a few other irons in the fire that we can't name names on yet.
Well, that leads exactly to where my last couple of questions here. So what is next for your team and for your app?
Man, I guess I'll take that on first. What I always say is what's next has to start with what are our members asking for. I think that the biggest thing that I learned in my time at IBM and really being immersed in the design thinking methodology was, listen to the people who you're designing and creating this for. So the two biggest things that we've heard from our members, one is just more visibility into market value. So again, we don't want to say, hey, here's the exact price of this shoe and just try to balance the dollars, but giving people a general sense of, if you look across the market, this shoe gets anywhere from $1,000 to $1,200. It's just really useful reference information because, if you're trying to facilitate a trade, you don't want the market value to be way off. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is just facilitating communication within negotiations. So, right now it's really, you're just bouncing offers back and forth. And so we're just thinking about what things can we add that'll just make it a little bit easier for you to communicate your preferences when you're actually in a negotiation with somebody. Outside of that, Android app is coming soon. We're finalizing a loyalty program for our top traders. And then as a data nerd, one of my favorite things that's coming soon is trade recommendations. So we've been building an algorithm on the back end that basically looks across the app, looks at people's closets and wish lists and, trade activity and behavior, and then uses that information to really play matchmaker, right? So it's like, hey, Darren and Jeremiah, you guys might not know each other, but we've analyzed the data and we think there's a really, high likelihood trade that you guys can do. We just basically offer it up to both of you guys. And it's like, if y'all want to match, go for it. If not, also cool. So some of the stuff that's on the horizon for us.
Shout out, Kenny.
Shout out Kenny.
Shout out Kenny. I saw him in the back right before we started, but he was like, make sure you mention him.
Yes. And then if I can, just to top about on that, in terms of what's next, what's been really awesome to kind of witness as we were building this thing was just like the organic growth. Like we've spent next to nothing on marketing and promo, and all of the growth that we've experienced to date has been largely organic. And so now we have a plan to start actually putting some funds into marketing and promo, and so that'll become a lot more people will know about Tradeblock pretty soon.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, how do people find you? Obviously you can go directly to the App Store and you can look up Tradeblock to download your app. What are the other ways to get a hold of you guys if they're let's say that they're a sneakerhead influencer on YouTube and they want to reach out to you guys to do a specific review or whatever? What's a great way to get in touch with you guys?
I'd say the best way right now is probably through our Instagram. So we're at tradeblock.us. So basically the same thing as our website URL, just with the at sign at the beginning. And yeah, just like we were talking about earlier with our member support, we have people who are actively managing our social media accounts. So, if you shoot us a direct message, you're going to get a response really quickly. Our buddy Edmund, who's also super crucial, and he probably deserves a lot of credit that we weren't able to give because we only have so much time. But Edmund will definitely respond to you. And yeah, we'll make it happen.
Awesome. And a quick question just crossed my mind. The Tradeblock app itself, does it cost anything to download?
Nope.
No, sir.
Does it cost anything to become a member?
No, sir.
$3.99.
Nope. You only pay when you trade.
So you can create collections, you can download it, you can create your own. What if you don't even have your sneaker collection organized? Could you use the Tradeblock app to build your own database of what you got inside of this with your collection?
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, if you for anybody who goes and watches that Unbreakable Kicks video, one of the things he says towards the end is like, man, my favorite thing is I could just throw all of my inventory on here, and have it there to show it off, but also it's kind of documented and it almost acts as like an inventory management tool as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I bet that's going to help a lot of sneakerheads that have a bunch of Google Sheets floating around trying to keep track of everything they've got, Well, thank you guys so much for joining me for this interview. Everybody watching, this has been our Dallas Weekly interview for our Business is Black campaign, powered by Mark Cuban Companies. I've been talking with Tradeblock, a sneaker trading app that is taking the world by storm. And if you go to YouTube, there is a lot of buzz going on about this company. And we will put the contact information for their Instagram, for downloading their app, and everything that you need to get a hold of Tradeblock into the description for this. But you've been listening to me interview the Mbiyimoh Ghogomu, who is the CEO, Darren Smith, the COO, and Tony Malveaux, who's the Director of Authentication over at Tradeblock. Guys, thank you so much. And I will tell you one thing. As soon as we get out of here, my publisher wants me to send her the information for Tradeblock so she can download it. And she was asking me some of those exact questions that we got in there. It's like, can I put my entire sneaker inventory into this app? How does trading work? How do these things work? And I'm like, hey, as soon as I get done with this interview, I will tell you. So everybody watching, thank you so much. And thank you guys so much for joining us. And we'll be back with another amazing Business is Black interview shortly.